those who are going to speak, the issue of the YCL speaking before the General Secretary is closed. The issue which we must talk about, the report which you are expecting, when the steering committee is ready, they will table that report. Let's hear a KZN, followed by, is that Gauteng? You want to come again, Western Cape?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, we are Moses Mabhida province, and we must, Chair, firstly appreciate that now you have resolved on the issue of the YCL speaking. And we want to support that YCL speaking before the General Secretary speaks. And according to our own understanding, Chair, that was the only remaining matter on your ruling. That was the only remaining matter on your ruling, Chair, that the YCL was not disputing anything else except on your ruling, except that the YCL must come first before the General Secretary. And that matter, we think that it has been resolved. And therefore, your ruling stands, Chair. We think from now on, Chair, from this point, we don't think that we must continue entertain this debate, comrade. To some of us, it's painful. To some of us, it's painful, comrade, because we think that we are attending the Congress of the South African Communist Party. And if you are in a Congress of the South African Communist Party, what we need to be entertaining in a program is that dialectically, because that's how we need to debate issues as a South African Communist Party, that dialectically, what material change does it make if the General Secretary is presenting the report of the party, which is not responding to anyone else, giving the report of the party to us as a Congress. And therefore, Chair, we think that from now your ruling must stand because that was the only issue and we have resolved it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Sorry, Chief. What are you supporting?
Chair, you said, Chair, the YCL, that matter now that the YCL must speak is resolved. That's the first thing that you are supporting, Chair. Secondly, Chair, we are supporting that nothing must hinder the General Secretary of the party from giving the report to the Congress. And after the YCL, we want the General Secretary to come and give the report to the Chair. Thank you very much. Then when the steering committee is ready, it can report anytime because we don't think that has anything to do with the report of the General Secretary. Thank you very much.
There was Gauteng.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Comrade Chair, we want to talk on two issues. The first one is that the appeal by the Free State, which reaffirms the ruling that you have made, should stand. That is the first point we want to raise. The second point, Chair, is that it's on a procedural matter of how we're conducting the Congress. One, Chair, is that once we have had democratic discussions, we must allow the center to hold. Because if we are going to split our democracy from its center, we are going to have anarchy. So, Chair, related to that is Congress is not run in a laboratory where all factors are held constant. In a Congress, the leadership that is presiding over the Congress will from time to time make decisions and adjustments depending on a number of factors. And I think if as Congress we strip the leadership of its mandate to run, guide, make tactical decisions to run the Congress, I think we're making a very big mistake. We want to appeal to Congress that we should afford the leadership in line with democratic centralism, the opportunity to guide Congress whilst not taking away the role of delegates. In that context, Chair, we also want to say, in line with what Comrade Matot has said, which is correct, we can't have our summaries and decisions paraded after they have been made. Once decisions and summaries are made, we believe they've taken every view into account and they should stand. Because treating summaries and decisions or directives with contempt undermine our democratic centralism. We want to appeal, Chair, we are in a Congress of a vanguard party, not of a mass organization. And we therefore want to plead that what Free State said and what you said be sustained, and that the table should be decisive in defending our character as the party. Thank you very much.
Comrade Western Cape, you are the last. Was your hand up? No, Free State, you've spoken.
Yeah, thanks very much. There is something called intellectual humility, the capacity to admit and appreciate when we have erred. And such is very important for us as leadership. Let's accept leadership erred and allowed COSATU to speak before the YCL. We often get annoyed and irritated when in the ANC, the party COSATU speak after the Youth League or the Women's League. Now here in the party, we let COSATU speak. So we erred there, and the program is clear, the YCL. Therefore, the YCL should speak just before the General Secretary. Because the issues they raise, they may be canvassing and the GS may respond to them. The chair of the YCL was correct, that they may say things which may contradict the General Secretary or the political report. That's the first thing. The second thing relates to the issue of the ANC speaking tomorrow. I want to appeal to Congress, agreeing with other provinces such as Free State, to say, one, the program was developed in such a manner and leadership erred. Congress was given space to add their views on the matter. And we expressed our displeasure about it. And therefore, let the president of the ANC speak as scheduled. And do what happened in one Congress. Should the president say anything contra which perhaps were uncomfortable, the leadership come and respond immediately. That will help. So for sake of progress, let's focus on pertinent issues, and even his input is quite important and it must be engaged, and leadership will need to prepare as he presents his message. On those bases, let's move. You allow the YCL, the GS come, the president come tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, comrades. Comrades, what is very clear, you are not one on this issue of the YCL. And I don't want, no, there are those who are saying they must speak after. There are those who are saying they must speak. Wait, comrades. Wait. Don't howl. Now, I'm going to rescind my decision and immediately call the YCL to come and speak.
Amandla. 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 Long live Kosas, long live. Long live Sasko, long live. Long live Kosas, long live. Long live Sasko, long live. My Fuge, Yosik, my Fuge. Long live Kosatu, Yamakas, long live. Long live Sanko, long live. Long live Glensi, long live. Long live Kosatu, long live. Long live the SACP, long live. Manta. Thanks, Chair of the session. Our Deputy National Chair, Comrade Chulas, the General Sec of our party, Comrade Blade, Taming Koshipa, the National Office Bearers of the party, the entire Central Committee, our National Chairperson of the YCL, the NOBs, the entire National Committee of the YCL, President of COSATU, the entire CEC present, the affiliates of COSATU that are with us, the leadership of the ANC present. I'm not sure if Comrade Kwete today, because yesterday it was said that today will be the national chair, so already that today has arrived. Will not be the CC, the national chair of the ANC, and the entire NEC members present. I saw the president of SASCO, I'm not sure if today is here, the convener of the ANC Youth League NYTT. At least we are happy that you managed to accept this invite, because you have always absconded invites of your own sister organization. But at least we appreciate that you are here today. The international guests present, most importantly, the esteemed delegates to this 15th National Congress of the party. And indeed, we are humbled today to be here, Comrade Chair, to this watershed moment. And we say it's a watershed moment because 5 years ago, we were here. And while we were here, the then deputy president of the ANC, while he was addressing us, he begged this Congress to pause. And today we're happy we're back at the same venue, which means it's easy to can now press a play. We're here, comrades, to analyze not only ourselves, but most importantly to remember that as a vanguard party, we are there for a class. And indeed, it's very much important from time to time to analyze the state of the working class, to analyze the state of our national democratic revolution. And as historically correctly captured, that if undeterred, the NDR shall be a direct route to socialism. So it means once it can be delayed or detected already, the road to socialism is delayed. What becomes most important, comrades, is for us to use this opportunity in understanding that this Congress must be able to rejuvenate hope for the hopeless masses of our people. This Congress must set a tone, even for the Congress that is coming in September, of the advanced detachment of the working class. Because as a vanguard, we need to give direction. And surely the advanced detachment of the working class will then find it easy to follow. But surely when then the Federation asks critical questions about the party, it means we need to use this Congress as the party to reflect where are we in relation to those that we represent as a class. And surely the party in these 101 years, it has been at the center of advancing key struggles for the liberation of this country. It has been in the forefront to fight against the post-1994 neoliberal trajectory. It has been in the forefront to fight against the corporate capture of the state. It has been in the forefront to lead the mass struggles. But from time to time, we need to analyze and understand that time, space, and condition is what must guide us and dictate what is to be done. And as we are gathered here today as these delegates, we need to obviously see and acknowledge that the working class is under siege. And this is a class we represent as a vanguard. The workers are facing austerity measures, are facing a clear neoliberal policy trajectory. And as the party has correctly coined post-1994, even in the opening of this Congress, the national chair spoke very clearly on how the party confronted gear that time. And it means, as we are here in this 15th Congress, we need to pave a way forward to say, how do we consolidate the working class? How do we indeed build a radical socialist movement to take forward the struggles? And it was this party that asked a critical question, that if our revolution was so expensive, what has happened for it to be so cheap? It further asked the critical question whether our national democratic revolution is on an internal ground. And as we come to this Congress as the YCL, we want to attempt to respond to those critical questions that the party has always asked. To say, indeed, the national democratic revolution is under siege. In essence, we believe as the YCL that the NDR is in a cul-de-sac. And the unfortunate part is that when you move and you reach a cul-de-sac, it means there's no going ahead. What becomes critical is for you now to consider either to take a bit of a detour so that you can continue to move. As we address this Congress, it's very much important, comrades, to understand that the YCL, for the past decade, when it attempted to influence its mother body, the party, to seize the moment and take a clear lead to the class, in particular in its relation to an electoral path. It has been a long journey, but surely there are critical issues that we must ask ourselves to say, does the working class still see ourselves as the real vanguard in action on the ground? Does the society itself still have hope and see the African National Congress as a leader of society? Do even the workers still see COSATU as a progressive federation, as a real federation to advance their interests? And we think this Congress must be tasked to at least have time to reflect on those aspects, because then it will be able to assist us to develop a path that is not aloof from the class that we lead. Because when the working class is under siege, and when we see day in, day out workers either being retrenched, we see workers when they demand what is due to them, there's no resources. When there's a national disaster, man, it's always readily there to intervene. When we see the skyrocketing high level of unemployment, then there's no clear way forward in terms of how do we intervene, in particular for the youth that are the most affected. Then we'll have no option but not to be patient as the YCL. Because ours is the interest for the youth, ours is the interest of the working class, nothing else. And the party has a responsibility from time to time to sharpen the contradictions. It is the duty of the ANC to manage those contradictions. We can't want to manage on behalf of a broad mass-based organization. Ours is to always be on the side of the working class. And it is in that manner we say there are serious challenges that are affecting the working class. We see the high level of basic needs for the working class increasing. We see the load shedding that indeed has become a blackout. And it is for our belief, Comrade Chair, that surely what is happening with the power utility is man-made. And this is a continued project to benefit few elites within and outside the movement. Then where's the vanguard to provide direction correctly around these issues? And it is in that manner, even as the YCL wish to lobby this Congress. Because when you analyze even some of these things within the state especially, we feel there's high level of misplacing that is happening. When you go to the Department of Public Enterprise in particular, you won't find a logical sense why, if the DOT as a legislative department and the one that is in charge of PRASA, why would then Transnet, which itself has even a large network of rail network which is used for passenger rail, then becomes in another department? That is just an example of many that could be there. And some of these challenges that are happening within the power utility, it is not only through the lack of capacity and leadership within that utility, but it's even with this misplacing of ESCOM within public enterprise, which then does not even have a mandate in terms of legislation to be able to deal with some of these issues. And this unnecessarily sometimes will create tensions even amongst those responsible in Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, and those within the public enterprise. Because some, even within the power utility, it is very clear that they are renewable energy fundamentalists, where they don't even care about the plight of the working class, or when then you want an abrupt shift, you will not be able to affect the workers that are there. And as the YCL, we support our party for a just transition as we continue to analyze this space and see how do we then assist the working class to come out of this misery that it is. But as we conclude our message, Comrade Chair, we would like to remind ourselves and quote one of the very key quotes coming from the articles that was written by our sitting General SACP, Comrade Dr. Blayton Zimande, while he was responding to a paper that was written by Comrade Joe Slovo during the era of negotiations. And the GS correctly argued as follows, open quote, "If our strategic perspective and line is that negotiations are a site of struggle and that the process should be mass-driven, then our theoretical starting point cannot be negotiations per se," close quote. And we wish to bring this outstanding perspective by the GS to the current political epoch and argue to this Congress that indeed, if our strategic perspective and line is that the alliance remain a site of struggle, or even the state itself, then the starting point of the question on the state and popular power cannot be the alliance per se, and the process must be mass-driven. Comrade GS located this point correctly, that our strategic objective is to transfer power to the people. And it is within this context that our discussion and the lobby to these 15 national congresses, the YCL, that the party must be able then to respond to those critical questions they asked. If whether our national democratic revolution is on an integragram, and immediately be able to seize the moment, because the theme of this Congress is very clear, that there's a need for a socialist path. And if there's a need of a socialist path, we need to build a radical socialist movement and save the national democratic revolution. And as we defend and advance and save this revolution, if the leader of the society, which so far is in denial of its sickness, which either is factionalism, it's where the organization is collapsing at the altar of groupings. It can no longer have capacity to even drive services to the people. You go to the local government sphere, It is even difficult today to lead mass struggles on the ground to defend our municipalities or advance issues of service delivery. We have reneged that responsibility as the entire movement, even to tenderpreneurs who use the same plight of young people who are unemployed to march for their own selfish interests. Where is the movement to be on the ground? And we are saying this is the time. The party to understand that historically it has always been a political party and a political party of power. When it was established and founded in 1921, 3 years later, in 1924, the party could have guts to confront a racist national government and contest elections. Cheers. I know I will never lose the touch, Comrade Chair. Actually, you are rejuvenating. If at that time we could be able to take that posture, and I was seeing in how the outcomes became, it was for us to list the mine workers' strike and where we're dealing with these challenges that were even there, where then this was just even a march for a few racists. That's why the same racist government rejected us. But then what becomes difficult for a party that is 101 years, that must assert itself on the ground as the oldest vanguard party in the continent, to always shiver when it has to relate to state power. This Congress must be able to analyze, to say, we understand that state power is very broad, but part of the aspects of asserting hegemony and playing a role in decision-making and legislative framework that will be pro-working class against what even today we see, the neoliberal trajectory that is going on unabatedly. Even when the Alliance Secretariat, when it takes a position on the SAA, government implements a different decision and take a different direction to what the Alliance has said. When we went to Polokwane, these were some of the challenges that the party was very vocal about. When government took powers and replaced the movement as the center of power to give direction on policy and direction. And this is the same current moment we are facing today. And we expect the party to take a lead and be able to provide a clear direction, because the working class is under siege. Every day they are butchered. When you go to the private sector, we see retrenchments day in and day out. Public servants, who some of them risk their life fighting for all of us, defending us against COVID-19, they can't be given their salaries. When we demand free education, we are given fee-free education. But when there's a national disaster, money is there. We have money to intervene for PPEs and provide and be there. Maybe we should declare unemployment as a national disaster so that our government then can have money to intervene. We must declare the state of the working class and the workers as a national disaster so that our government can have resources to intervene for the working class. Because they only intervene when there's a disaster. So hopefully, this message will find resonance to the delegates of this Congress, and understand that coming from Beachwood 2017, Destiny Hotel 2019, we've made strides even in terms of how the party must relate to the electoral path. This Congress must be a point where we are able then to put the issue into finality of being clear where we stand in relation to our working class. Amandla! Amandla! Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade National Secretary of the YCL. Ngiyabona ke. I've been told and advised that I'm too soft in my chairing. So I'm not going to do it from now. I'm going to be brutal. Thank you very much, Comrade National Secretary of the YCL, Comrade Tinyeko. You've raised critical issues of the unemployment, of the social crisis, of the role of the SOEs, the issues of the just transition. I don't know whether somebody had you on the just transition, because you seem to have shared notes with that person on the just transition. I think he feels more empowered now that we have raised that issue. Comrades, now we're going to the item of the presentation of the 14th Congress Central Committee report, the political report, which is going to be presented by Comrade General Secretary, Comrade Blade Zimand. Mfakeni lingo. committee members might be having it as it is presented, but they are still busy with that. At this stage, let me give it to Unopala. Comrade John Maluleke, uhleli endaweni wrong. Ngathi sithi uphuka.
Amandla! Amandla! Viva the South African Communist Party! Viva! Viva SACP, 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 SACP! Viva! Viva the African National Congress! Viva! Viva COSATU! Viva! Viva the YCL Ufasimba! Viva! Forward to socialism! Forward! Phansi ngecapitalism! Phansi! Phansi ngokudelezwa! Phansi! Phansi ngokuhlukumeza omama! Phansi! Phansi ngeshimane! Phansi! Amandla! Amandla! Thank you very much, Comrade Deputy National Chairperson, Comrade Tulas. Allow me, comrades, to start by greeting our National Chairperson, Comrade Senzeni Zogwana, who was commenting very nicely that he likes very much the colors on the roof of this hall where we are meeting. And I definitely agreed with him that those colors mixed with the red of the SACP, it looks good. Now, let me also, comrades, greet the national office bearers of our party, Comrade Tulas, our first Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Soli, our National Treasurer, Comrade Joyce Mloe Mropa, and all the members of the Central Committee who are seated in front here, including those members of the Central Committee who have decided to defy and sit down there. Let me also greet our glorious movement, the African National Congress, led by Comrade Gwede Matashe, the National Chairperson of the ANC, and the delegation of the ANC that is here. Let me also greet Comrade Zingi Losi, the President of our Federation. Comrade Losi, ICOSATU is our federation, proudly so as communists. The General Secretary, Comrade Bheki Ntshalintshali, Bagani, and the other office bearers and the members of the delegation of COSATU are here. Comrade Tinyi Kontini, the National Secretary of the YCL, and our delegation of the YCL here, Ufasimba. Let me also greet Meti Mpoani, our mother, very special mother of ours, and all the party stalwarts who are here with us today. Let me also greet not our international guests. We are not guests at this Congress. You are part of us, our international participants at this Congress. And also all our national domestic guests who have joined us from various formations that we are working with, including business representatives who also are able to assist us as the party now and again. You are all welcome. Let's also greet members of the diplomatic corps who are here, ambassadors and high commissioners who have joined us at this Congress, you are all welcome. But most importantly, comrades, allow me to greet all of you delegates to this 15th National Congress of the South African Communist Party. Comrades, let me start by making a plea. I like the energy that I'm seeing from you, debating and engaging. But can I request that now, with that energy, take it, let's transition now, and not focus it on discussing administrative matters. Let's use it now to transition to discuss the class politics of the revolution. I guess politics, my comrades. And that's where I want to suggest, let's take this energy to face the challenges facing our own revolution. As we complete this centenary year of the SACP, our tasks and responsibilities are greater than ever. We are now nearly 3 decades beyond the decisive democratic breakthrough of 1994. It was a breakthrough that marked the formal end of decades of white minority rule, built on 3 centuries of colonialism. The party, along with our allies, was in the forefront of that decisive 1994 democratic breakthrough. But after nearly 3 decades, comrades, life for the working class and for the broader majority of South Africans is in crisis. And the burden of this crisis hits women, and working class women in particular, hardest. It is no secret that the momentum of our national democratic struggle has stalled on many fronts. In some respects, the NDR is in reverse. It is no secret that our leading alliance partner, the ANC, by its own admission, is facing major internal challenges. A divided progressive trade union movement in a sea of mass unemployment is generally weaker now, if we face the truth, than 30 years ago. Proletarian communities, mainly in our urban townships and informal settlements, as well as in former Bantustans, are torn apart by the daily struggles for survival. Hence, I'm saying let's take our energy to the real issues facing the revolution. The current socio-economic crisis is deeply felt by the condition of the youth in our society, especially the exceedingly high levels of youth unemployment. One particular manifestation of the crisis facing young people is that nearly 4 million young people between the ages of 15 and 24 years are neither in education, employment, or training. This segment of young people is largely made up of youth from black working class and poor families. The crisis facing young people best illustrates the extent to which our national democratic revolution is encumbered by the very same contradictions it seeks to address. And one of those contradictions is the challenge facing young people in our country. It is also perhaps apt to put up front the reason for the impact of what we refer to as the multiple crises of capitalism hitting working class women hardest. This conceptual understanding must be brought to bear in our analysis and strategies to build a socialist society that does not discriminate and embed inequality between people, including based on race and gender. For instance, capitalism abdicates responsibility beyond the lowest wage capital can negotiate for the living conditions of the workers and the poor. You know, when capitalists are doing well, accumulating, all is okay, and the economy is doing well, and they often claim because of them. What they forget is that in that process of accumulation, they are deepening poverty and inequality for the overwhelming majority of the people. When that poverty and inequality hits crisis levels, they are the first ones to say, where is the government? Why is the government not addressing these problems? Yet when they eat alone, but when there are problems, they expect our own government to bail them out like they are doing now. This responsibility of poverty, inequality, and unemployment is shifted largely to women. In the household, comrades, it is women who carry a disproportionate burden of housework. Women are said to work a double day. Those who are working, they go to work or in the informal economy, and then come home and start again with cooking, cleaning, homework, bathing children, looking after the elderly, looking after the sick members of the family, and often tending to the needs of the men in the household as well. In fact, comrades, if truth be told, most of South Africa's households today are functional despite the enormity of the challenges that they are facing because of the role of women in those households. That's a fact that we have to accept. That is why we can't then be a society we wish to be if we were actually meting out violence, including femicide, against women in our country. We are actually destroying the future of our country. And comrades, it's a fact that the less the state provides public goods that are essential for a working class family's livelihood, the more it is the unpaid care work of women that carries the family. It is this unpaid labor that is not counted in the National Statement of Accounts, or when we talk about the gross domestic product. We don't count the labor of women. This double day for women is often ideologically justified through patriarchy and gender stereotypes that define women as carers, as cooks, and in some cultures prevent women from being involved in particular activities, particularly when they're in their biological reproductive cycle or menstruating. To truly shift the burden of women, society must do at least 4 things. Ensure that women's reproductive life cycle is accepted and supported in a manner that enables them to participate fully in society. It's a very strange thing that the fact that women carry human beings for 9 months in their stomachs makes them to be regarded as lesser human beings. Ordinarily, they should be regarded as more than just human beings because they are able to carry this human life for 9 months and ensure that they bring that human life to fruition after 9 months. But ideologically, that gets presented as a frailty and as a weakness that often leads to discrimination against women. So we have to accept this. Secondly, we need to eradicate gender inequality within the family. Ensure that also, thirdly, women are safe in the home, in the community, and in the workplace. And fourthly, ensure that women have access to and resources for full participation in the economy, in politics, and in social life. To ensure that women who are delegates to the 15th Congress of the SACP are made to be able to participate effectively no less than male delegates. By ensuring that whatever specific needs they have, they need to be catered for. In all this, comrades, the truth is, black working class and poor women are the most affected because of the legacy of triple oppression that comprises racial oppression, class super-exploitation, and patriarchal domination. As a vanguard party, we must bring this understanding to bear throughout our structures, in our workplaces, in our relationship with our allies, and in all campaigns and struggles that we are involved in. The struggle for socialism is simultaneously a struggle against women's oppression. Now, let us return to the main question, comrades. Why is the life for the working class, including women, including its youth, why is that life for the broader majority of South Africans in crisis? And much more importantly, what is to be done? That is the task before this Congress, comrades. I would like to emphasize that. Let's not use our energies in a misplaced way. Our energies must be about what is to be done about these challenges we are outlining in this report. There are frequent calls at the moment for a social compact between so-called social partners, government, business, the labor movement, and civil society. We also have Mr. Nedlek here in his deployment right next to me. As the SACP, we are not opposed in principle to engagements of this kind. We want to make this clear. And in fact, we support it. But those proposing it must seriously analyze the structural problems that we need to address. In particular, we need to do a serious class analysis of what has occurred in South Africa over the past 3 decades. The sober reality is that the class balance of forces that made possible the radical political and constitutional breakthrough of the mid-1990s has changed. It has changed unfavorably for the broader working class and poor. Any social compact under these conditions will be seriously weighted against the working class and poor, against the working class youth and working class women in particular, in the context of the legacy of colonialism of a special type. It will be a compact in which the prevailing and suffocating neoliberal macroeconomic framework will be off limits, non-negotiable. A social compact under these conditions will simply be about some redistributive trade-offs that will not address the deep underlying political economic crisis. That is why, for any such compact to succeed, it must be based on concrete analysis of concrete conditions. We are not against the social compact, Tishomkhulu, in your deployment as Minister of Employment and Labor. But we are saying let's be Marxist in our approach to it. What are the conditions that we are facing now? In a way, our constitution can be regarded as having been some kind of a social compact in 1996. But it was a social compact based on a different balance of forces than we are at right now. And this is why then in this political report, we are proposing as our line of march for the next 5 years and beyond that the party must play a key role in building a powerful socialist movement of the working class and poor. All the other key organizational comrades, all the other key organizational, electoral, and socio-economic objectives we have consistently raised over the past are dependent for their realization on building a powerful socialist movement of the working class and the poor. Whether it is in addressing the multiple system crisis of inequality, unemployment, poverty, the rising cost of living, whether it is reversing the growing popular disillusion with electoral politics that we are seeing in our country, whether it is ensuring a just green transition or industrialization, whether it is achieving real renewal of an ANC in a downward spiral or reconfiguration of our alliance, all of these objectives will remain out of reach unless we fundamentally change the balance of class forces much more effectively in favor of the great majority of South Africans, the workers and poor. That also includes, comrades, what we are singing about. There is no state power if you don't have power on the ground. That is the reality. There is no state power if you can't shift on the ground the balance of forces in favor of the workers and the poor. You can dream about it, but it won't happen if objectively the conditions have not been changed. And we are saying the primary form through which we should change this is to build this powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor. It's not for the workers and the poor. Because if we are saying it's a socialist movement for the workers and the poor, we are assuming that we're going to build it somewhere else and then bring it to the workers and the poor. It must be a socialist movement built by workers themselves in this country. So the fundamental challenge facing the revolution at this point in time is to wage a struggle to tilt the balance of forces in favor of the workers and the poor. How do we do that? That's the task of this Congress, Maqabane. That's what we should be debating and be prioritizing and be seeking to spend every minute of this Congress debating and coming out with the way forward on this particular matter. Let us begin, for instance, with what we all know. According to the World Bank, South Africa is the most unequal society on earth. We have the highest levels of income inequality. Our wealth inequality is even greater. We have what must rank as the world's worst crisis levels of unemployment, at an unsustainable level now approaching 50%. In the broader and more accurate definition, youth unemployment is at around an incredible 70%. Unemployment of women of all working ages, with black women being the most affected, is 6.5% higher than that of men. Given that the racial and gender dimensions of unemployment continue to be rooted in the stubborn and persisting legacy of colonialism of a special type, it is pretty obvious that young black women are the majority of the unemployed. Consequently, mass poverty and related challenges like food insecurity, vulnerability of the poor to weather-related disasters like we have seen recently in KZN and Eastern Cape, including things like TB, COVID-19, diabetes, and many other chronic diseases. Our people are vulnerable to that because of some of these challenges. The resulting loss of social cohesion is apparent in the fact that we are also amongst the most violent societies in the world. Perhaps with the exception of only those who are in the midst of military conflict. Comrades, this Communist Party can't be dilly-dallying at this Congress and focusing on things that are not a priority. Last year alone, it's estimated, Comrade Chair, that just under 400 girls between the ages of 10 and 14 gave birth to children. Ingane na 10, thola umntwana. What is that reflecting? Teenagers between the ages of 13 and 17 in East London, they die being in a shibini. That's one of the most serious expressions of this multiple crisis of social reproduction that we are talking about. And we are facing the reality of a society that is in decay. Let's face that as communists. And not dilly-dally about it. The fact that more than half of gender-based violence does not happen in the streets in the darkness. It actually happens where women are staying and where they are supposed to be safe. That is where they get raped, that is where they get assaulted, that is where they get killed. In my deployment, students rightly fight with me and say, we need student accommodation that is safe. That's true, they are right. But we need to do more than that if we are to deal with gender-based violence, because it's in some of these most beautiful student accommodation that women students are chopped into pieces, like it happened with the young lady from East London at Fort Hare. These are facts. It's not statistics. They affect real, living human beings in our society. They testify to the daily reality of working class households and communities, to children going to bed hungry and losing their childhood, to unemployed youth with their dreams shattered, to women suffering from the most awful gender-based violence, to LGBTQI plus people being abused, to retrenched workers on street corners holding up placards that say plumber, welder or plasterer, hoping to be picked up by a bucky for at least 1 day's work this week, to human traffickers preying on the most desperate and the most vulnerable. Surely this Congress can't be preoccupied with non-issues when our country and the revolution is faced with these realities. It can't be. That would be irresponsible, and you would not be the Communist Party that the working class expects in this country. We can't be showing ourselves on television debating non-issues actually, instead of saying we've come here to spend time to address this. And what does this require? It requires that we unite ourselves. A Congress is not a place for grandstanding. A Congress of a Communist Party is a place to address these realities that we are coming from and we are returning back to when we go to our places of abode or in our workplaces. Now, these are daily South African realities. In different degrees, you will find them throughout the global south. But what makes South Africa as a global outlier, outcast almost, is the degree to which poverty and unemployment occur amid extreme inequality and significant wealth. All these things that we're outlining here, they are sitting side by side with people who are filthy rich in this country. Because South Africa is a global outlier in other respects as well. For instance, the value of speculative capital on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, or it's called the Securities Exchange now, is around 3 times more than our GDP. Stock exchange, by the way, is like a casino, is a place for capital to gamble. So there is more money for gambling by capitalists than our gross domestic product. To gamble with our lives and the lives of the working class. That's what capitalism is. And even more so today, as this political report will show just now. We are like a dog with a tail that is triple the size of the rest of its body. The rand is amongst the most traded emerging market currencies. We are said to have amongst the most sophisticated of financial sectors. Are these different sets of realities unconnected? On the one hand, the social calamity that I've been talking about, and on the other hand, the hyper-financialization on the other. Are inequality, poverty, unemployment, and endemic social violence, as we are told, merely a legacy of a hangover from decades of apartheid, worsened by state capture, or what Marx in Capital Volume 1 called the fraudulent alienation of the state, and supposedly unpredictable? Are South Africa's hyper-financialization characteristics essentially a positive reality, as we are constantly being told? We have a good, nice, large financial sector. We regard that. We are told it's a big positive for our economy. The terrible legacy of colonial and apartheid past and endemic corruption are major factors, comrades. We are not underestimating them. But it is the hegemony of the financial oligarchy and its related neoliberal policies and its capture of some of our public institutions, including the Reserve Bank, Treasury, and the Public Investment Corporation, and its deep influence upon government and wider society that have become the major drivers of the deepening socio-economic crisis confronting the majority of South Africans. That's the thesis from this political report. That what we are actually now dealing with is as a result of this financial oligarchy that is actually at the heart and controlling our economy. We'll spend a bit of time in explaining this in this political report. It is for this reason that in this political report, as we review the strategy and tactics and the tasks of the SACP in the coming 5 years, it is necessary that we begin right here. We need to reflect much more deeply on the nature of the neoliberal hyper-financialization of our economy and its socio-economic impact that has been underway very rapidly since 1994. To put it bluntly, over the past quarter century, there has been an aggressive neoliberal assault driven by the financial oligopoly on our new democracy. Our democracy is being assaulted by this financial oligarchy. There are many examples, by the way, comrades. You see adverts on television. It appears it's an advert, I won't mention the name of a company, that is selling you means that when you are sick, you go to hospital. And then it adds very quickly. For each day you are in hospital, you're going to get so much money. That's financialization of health. That advert is not selling health, it's selling money. It's actually selling debt. That's just one simple, clear example of the extent of the financialization of our lives and the financialization of our economy. The stranglehold that the monopoly financial sector now has over our political economy undermines our ability to effectively advance key developmental programs like reindustrialization, major infrastructure build programs that we need, universal basic income grant or a national health insurance, or funding of students in higher education, for instance. All these things we are agreed we must do, but the single biggest enemy is the financial oligarchy that actually is holding. Now here you are, Tishomkul, Comrade Tulas, deployed as a minister. When you go to NECLAC to negotiate, you have got representatives from employers. Who are they actually? It's the financial sector. It's even positioning itself as representing the interests of employers in totality, when they are actually representing a section, but a very powerful section, that controls our economy. Marxist analysis of the earlier apartheid era political economy correctly identified, Comrade Gwede, the mineral energy complex as the dominant capitalist sector in South Africa. This dominance was reflected in a number of other core features. An economy whose primary mode of existence was the digging of mineral resources and sending them to the ports out of the country unprocessed, and then importing all finished goods that we actually need from outside the country. That was at the heart of what we call the minerals industrial complex. It's the mineral energy complex. But also the other features of this was that by doing that, we remained a peripheral society in the global scale of things. With being a low-waged, unskilled labor, initially as migrants from labor reserves in South and Southern Africa. In other words, the minerals energy complex characterized a typical colonial economy with particularly patriarchal features, with women largely excluded from the productive economy and peripheralized often into the labor reserves. And they are still there, many of them. Much as there is movement to urban areas, but many women are still locked in the former Bantustans. And the former Bantustans represents some of the poorest areas in our country, where there is hardly any economic activity. A major feature of this mineral energy complex was its very high levels of monopoly concentration. In fact, a single conglomerate, Anglo-American, rooted in mining, dominated some 80% of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in the early 1990s. One company, it was Anglo-American, which was 80% in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. In its social composition and logic of capital accumulation, the mineral energy complex is deeply patriarchal. These problematic structural features, comrades, still remain embedded in our political economy. Our economy remains highly concentrated. The way in which the mineral energy complex has skewed the inbuilt trajectory of our society remains in place. But now, since our democratic breakthrough, there have been significant changes that we have to understand. If we are to understand what has happened to the world of work, what has happened to our communities, and what has happened to the post-apartheid state. Unless we do so, we will not be able to effectively position the party strategically. While mining remains an important sector, particularly for foreign currency export earnings, and as a major but declining source of jobs, its relative size within South Africa's overall GDP has diminished to just 8% from 21% in 1980. I'm not saying, Comrade Gwede, that mining is a sunset industry, but it has diminished over the period as also the financial sector grows. From around the mid-1990s, coinciding with the democratic breakthrough and in line with global capitalist trends, the financial sector has grown. You know, in 1994, comrades, Kumalo uyakubona lapho, Comrade Kasrils. In 1994, the financial sector in South Africa constituted 6.5% of the GDP. Today, it is 25% of our economy. And industrialization has been the opposite direction, declining, and we're an economy that is experiencing deindustrialization. And these developments have transformed many of the dominant features of the capitalist class. Class representatives, black and white, by the way, of the financial services sector, notably the banking oligopoly, but also the major asset management and insurance corporates, are now clearly the hegemonic force within the capitalist class. Monopoly finance capital, as I have said, now presents its interest as if it is the interest of business as a whole. This financial sector class dominance is reinforced by the increasing financialization of other sectors of the economy, like mining and retail. The penetration of financialization into other sectors includes the major shift in corporate practice to enhancing shareholder values above all else, and giving millions of rands to CEOs and CFOs as rewards, grotesque rewards, not for productive outcomes, but to make more money in the short term for the shareholders. That's why CEO wasesibani can earn several 100 million rands per annum, but they are resisting to pay mine workers give an increase of 1,000 rand a month. Because that is now the direction that is actually becoming even worse. This dominance of the monopoly finance sector has also been characterized, this is one feature of our state, by the way, of a revolving door. And we want to raise this because we are concerned about it as the SACP, between National Treasury, the Reserve Bank, and the private banking sector. If you look at our comrades deployed there now, and others, you can see, if you leave National Treasury, you are likely to go to work for a bank. If you leave a bank and join government, you are likely to go to the Reserve Bank. This is an unhealthy relationship that is actually causing the throttling of our economy by monopoly finance capital at the direct expense of building a productive economy that would create jobs. So much for such a small economy like ours, that we have got such huge. The financial sector in South Africa, there are 4 big banks, only 4. Country like the United States is not like that. China is not like that. There are myriads of banks. There are agricultural banks, there are construction banks. In South Africa is 4 major oligopolies, and who have no interest in banking the unbanked, no interest in borrowing poor black South Africans money to try and make ends meet. We were right in 2000 by launching the financial sector campaign. And we're going to argue in this political report, we need to resuscitate that campaign. That's what should be preoccupying us, Maqabane. By God. This is what should be preoccupying us in this Congress. What is to be done about this reality? You know, the arrogance of the financial sector is unbelievable. Comrade Tito Mboweni, who was Minister of Finance not so long ago, says, quoted by Business Day, you know, government at the height of COVID-19 decided to give 200 billion rands to guarantee small business who are facing difficulties because of COVID-19. And Treasury took the risk for 94% of the 200 billion rands. You know how much of that was spent by the banks? Only 18.4 billion rands, and spent largely on white-owned small business. Comrade Tito laments. Ngangcono ukuthi uMboweni walamenta sewuminister, angalamenta sehambile. He says he called a meeting, even invited the president, and the bank said, we are not interested in doing what you are asking us to do. That money remains unspent for what it was meant for even today. That's the arrogance of the financial sector, telling us as government to go jump. In the midst of the needs that we actually have in society. According to the same report that talks about this 200 billion rands, it's not me saying it, the Reserve Bank connived with the private banks in this antisocial conduct. And what it illustrates is that the logic of the financial sector is profit-making, not to address the inequalities and poverty and unemployment that we are facing. These policies, by the way, do not only run counter to the interests of the working class, it even runs counter to the interests of the middle strata. If you remember, those who are here, who were part of our early years of the financial sector campaign, the party even got support in that campaign from many professionals who were hugely indebted, from many business people. Even until today, NAFCOC requested to have a meeting with the South African Communist Party to say, you are the only party that we hear is constantly raising the problems we are facing with the financial sector as small business. But abanye siyasithi siyabathemba ukuthi basisize sikhompyutha nabo. But we politics ngapha bakubusiness at the same time, but at least the Communist Party, we know that you are being principled about this. Even sections of the capitalist class, comrades, are against this dominance of finance capital because they are not getting money to invest in productive manufacturing industry. Sections of the manufacturing industry is not happy about this dominance. You can even form allies as communists, as the working class, with that section of capital that at least is committed to invest in the productive sectors of our economy so that we can create jobs. Now, we are being told every day about the virtues of neoliberalism. Any thought of even trying different economic paths, we are told it's not going to work. Even ANC policy documents, for that matter. Konama conveners la, ukomrade uGwede, no comrade uKubai. Ba convener kwa ANC economy, ba convener kwa hulumeni economy. Some of the ANC documents are beautiful in terms of commitments to what we need to do about our economy. But those things are not being implemented because the financial sector simply says, this is not in our interest. And the banks, abanini bemali. We have to confront this. You have to confront this. Take a look at any South African banknote. On the side, with Comrade Madiba's face, at the top in bold letters you will see South African Reserve Bank, and below it the signature of the Reserve Bank governor, whoever it is at that time. But the money the state collects in revenue that we see in those monies from taxpayers does not come in the first place from one arm of the state, for instance, the Reserve Bank. Now, we are told many stories about why certain things cannot happen. The Reserve Bank does print money. The money that we borrow from the banks does not only come from the money we put in there that we bank. It also comes from monies given to the banks by the Reserve Bank. So the Reserve Bank can print money after all. But it prints money to support this financial sector, not printing money with conditionalities to say a percentage of this money must go into manufacturing and productive investment. We are not saying that South African Reserve Bank, as we will be told now, can simply just churn out any amount of money regardless. But we are saying if this printed money is also injected into the more productive sectors of the economy, we could be in a vastly different situation. We must make it very clear, comrades. We are against, as the SACP, both neoliberal austerity, much as we are against the state capture. Because both things are not going to help us to change our economy to address the realities that I was actually talking about. When we are being against austerity, we are not saying that government must waste resources. No. But government must be able to spend resources in a prioritized fashion so that we are able to deal with this reality that we are faced with. 70% youth unemployment is a ticking time bomb. Finish. But what are we to do as part of fighting this? Enough of an analysis now. What are we to do in fighting this? If we accept that the single biggest class enemy is monopoly finance capital and the way it behaves, what are we to do as the South African Communist Party? Firstly, comrades, we have to demystify macroeconomics or economics generally. And I'm sorry to say this doesn't go against my deployment, but a lot of what goes on in our university as economics courses, economics again, but look at it critically. We are just being taught neoliberal economics. Wrong. Part of the transformation of the curriculum is to teach political economy in our institutions. Those calling for decolonization of our universities, part of the decolonization is to teach political economy that talks about building an economy that is going to address the interests of the overwhelming majority of our people, not neoliberal economics on how to enrich the financial oligarchs in our country. So we need to demystify that. As we have said, comrades, as an alliance, we have got very good economic policies, but they are suffocated by this financial sector, which is overweening, overly powerful. So the first struggle we must wage is an ideological struggle. Already, by the way, in the light of the economic crisis that we are facing, more developed countries are abandoning aspects of neoliberalism. But they are telling us, continue to do. They say, in other words, don't do as we do, do as we tell you. Pursue neoliberalism. Don't look at us that we are beginning to move away in some respects. Working with a range of progressive NGOs and other policy institutes and mobilizing, the SACP must play an active role in opening up the macroeconomic policy debate. If we use this Congress to take this debate forward, we will be using this Congress much more productively, comrades. Much more productively. So that we can go and engage our own constituency. No grandstanding, please, in the face of these challenges that we have. We must also demystify the issue of public debt. I want to simplify this. It's written in detail here, you will see it. There are certain features about South African debt that we owe as a country. That gives us some advantage. First of all, comrades, there are certain things we must challenge. We are told that you can't have any country's debt being more than 80% of the GDP. It's a rule, Comrade Sol, that we can't. There's no science about this. Absolutely no science. The debt of GDP, of debt to US GDP is 120%. If it is 120% in the US and in any developing country it must not be more than 60%, why? And we are not being reckless by saying just go and accumulate debt. But the manner in which you accumulate debt must be related to your economic priorities and your economic program. It's like this thing we are told that inflation must be only be between 3% and 6%. If your economy is growing faster, inflation can run at way beyond 6%, but you are able to manage your economy better because it is turning. It's creating jobs. In other words, let's not take these ideological prescriptions without serious analysis and serious engagement. And they will say, yeah, these communists, they are being reckless. They say just borrow, borrow, borrow. That's not what we are saying. But there is no rule which says that your debt can't be more than 60% of GDP. Those who say there is such a rule, they are lying. The reality of what is happening in the world today disproves this. Let me give another related example. And please, Kosatu, listen to us carefully, Comrade Zing. It's estimated that South Africa's pension and retirement funds are 8 trillion rands. That's 2-3 years ago already. 8 trillion rands. Ungangibuza ukuthi malini mina ngowakaDambuza. All I know is imali eningi. That's all I know, imali eningi. It's a lot of money. 8 trillion rands. Where is this money being invested? Who is benefiting from this 8 trillion rands? If you take, for instance, government employees pension fund, Tisomkulu, GEPF, invest its money through the PIC, but GEPF is funded as if the 1.3 million public servants will all retire on the same day. And we are locked. Money is locked as if this money go retire bonke lama public servants on the same day. No country operates like that. Those who are working pay the pension of those who are in pension, who are retired. That is how normally pension funds work. Take a country like Finland. Finland takes about 15% of its workers' retirement and pension funds and invest it in infrastructure? What percentage we in South Africa are we investing of workers' pension funds? 2%. Who says that there is a rule of 15% in relation to Finland, but only 2% for South Africa? In other words, we are having this fat financial sector which is sitting in monies. Usually it's the middlemen, and it's often men, by the way, not women. It's the middlemen who are chowing it, moving it from this one place to the other place. There is no rule which actually says. That is why, as the SACP, what we are also calling for, comrades, and that is why I'm saying to the Federation, simamelen maqabane, because it's your money that is being invested. Why are we not taking some of this money without negatively affecting? In fact, often you grow the rewards, the returns to the pension fund, and say it must be invested in particular priority areas. That is how the apartheid regime built ISCO then, and built ESCOM, and built Transnet. The apartheid regime simply said, this amount of money from the financial sector must go and be invested there, in our priorities. And one of the things that organized workers can do in our country, yes, Comrade Zeng, we are right to say we are expecting the vanguard to do A, B, C, D. We'll do our best to try and do that. But also the vanguard is saying to you as organized workers, go and say where your money should be invested. It's in your hands. It's not in the hands of the Communist Party. That's why in our financial sector campaign we were saying, we made lots of gains, comrades. Regulation of the credit bureau, expansion of banking services and ATMs, very important gains. But those were smaller consumer type gains. Our campaign never touched the heart of the financial sector. We will touch the heart of the financial sector the day organized workers in this country stand up and say 2 trillion rands of our retirement funds must go to build infrastructure in townships and rural villages and create jobs there. It's possible, it can be done, it's not a dream. Ideologues will tell us that the Communist Party is talking rubbish. We are talking sense, we know it can be done, other countries are doing it. Now, let me come back to this issue, the nature of our public debt. South Africa is lucky because 90% of our public debt, they are in rands. And they are from local institutions, about DBSA, OIDC, PIC, and all that. We are not affected by the rand-dollar exchange, like those countries whose debt is dollar-denominated. This gives us huge advantage. ESCOM is in debt at the moment. This Congress will have to reflect on this. I'll come back to ESCOM and electricity. This Congress must reflect on that. We can deal, Kosato suggested this at some stage, we hope that you don't stop it. That you can actually use the fact that we have got rand-denominated debt and that is local debt to deal with the debt that is hanging around ESCOM. We can do that. It can be done. Because of the nature and the character of it. That's one of the other things that we need to be looking at and we actually need to be doing. The other thing, comrades, is to transform the banking and wider financial sector. I think that the report has already spoken about, or I have highlighted a number of those issues on what can be done to transform this. One of the victories of our financial sector campaign was the passage, led by Comrade Rob Davis, if I'm not mistaken, of the Cooperative Banks Act. It wasn't you, it was yourself as Minister of Trade and Industry, directly as a result of our own campaign. That legislation is lying fallow because we are not building cooperative banks. When we started the financial sector campaign in year 2000, we were told at that time that Soweto alone, the townships of Soweto alone, at that time in the year 2000, they were taking 60 million rands per week to the banks from Stockfields in Soweto. At that time, the single largest burial society was Elokshini Tembisa, with about 20,000, not members, 20,000 households as members of that Tembisa burial society. But take that money all to AVBOB and all to the banks, not 1 cent comes back to actually develop Tembisa. These are struggles that we were waging that are still important. Mthembu, kukhona isonto lapha eKZN okuthiwa kwaShembe. Right? eLimpopo kukhona uRhanyana. eKZN kukhona uShembe. Do you know that 60% ye-Vaseline Blue Seal eproduced Unilever ithengwa kwaShembe? 60% of all Vaseline produced by Unilever is sold to kwaShembe because abantu bakwaShembe bakholelwa ukuthi mawuthandazelwe kahle umfundisi uVaseline ukwazi ukugada nanento eziningi. That's why mawuse KZN amatekisi amaningi owagibele kunebhodlela leBlue Seal. That's the working class, comrades. It's us. Abasebenzi. Yeah. Ukuthi sigadeke ngazo zonke indlela. But what is the contribution of Unilever to those communities, zakwaShembe, KZN? Zilch, nothing. Why is the Communist Party not taking up that campaign? We tried, by the way, to the credit of the SACP in KZN, and engaged with very senior leaders of Shembe Church around this particular matter. All right, this is my example. It's not in the political report. I'm trying to illustrate what is in the political report. Comrades, a tragic development was VBS, the Vendor Building Society. A great initiative, actually, by ordinary people in a section of Limpopo to pull together resources that is going to support them with their small businesses and many other activities stolen by corrupt elements. We were honored those who passed away in that struggle. These are the basis and the foundations of building something out of the workers' own meager resources by pulling them together to be able to contribute in creating a better life for all. By the way, that slogan of the ANC is the nicest of all slogans. A better life for all. We can give it socialist content because it's a very progressive slogan. Now, comrades, the other thing that we need to do with the financial sector include the following, or to fight austerity. We must intensify our campaign for a universal basic income grant. That's what the political report is calling this Congress to endorse and drive. Because we are of the view that a universal basic income grant to all citizens can make a contribution, even more so now, with the rising cost of living that we are facing to put money into the pockets of our people, and most of that money will be spent in the local economy, people buying local goods. Ordinary people, they don't import fancy shoes or clothes from overseas. They buy local, creating jobs, and it's not a waste of money. The issue of a universal basic income. If the Western Cape Benson disagrees, the KZN, let it be about how to implement a universal basic income grant. Not a disagreement as in what is tea. Let that be a debate between in Northwest, Nempumalanga, Lagu Plenary, how best to implement a universal basic income grant. That is what we are expecting this Congress to do. Ndisene right yokusho lonto ngoba ngiso General Secretary we at least for another day or so. Ningangijaha ukuthi ngihambe, ngiyahamba kona kodwa ke ngisakhona madoda. Ya ngisawunobhalo omkhulu walombutho wamabutho. At least until sometime tomorrow afternoon or something like that. So ngisene right yokuthi nginitshele ningilalele. Comrades, another big issue that the political report is placing before this Congress to say, let's take it up, is a campaign, comrades, on public employment programs. Public employment programs. We go into detail in the political report. I don't have the time now to do that. We've got extended public works programs. We need to expand those. There are so many needs in our townships, in our informal settlements, in our rural villages that require and can be sustained through public employment programs. I've just had a statistic recently that there are 90,000 crashes in South Africa. 90,000 crashes. All of them, I can bet you my last half a cent, they are run by women. And providing a crucial role of looking after the children, the young of the working class when their parents are out there hustling. Some are working, others are hustling in the informal economy. There's a public service. Ideally, all those women should be employed through public employment programs. Look at what happened at KZN, comrades, recently with the floods. By the way, that's just an introduction, unfortunately. We are still going to have more of that devastation with climate change. And in other provinces as well, unfortunately. It's not nice to say it, but it's the truth. You notice that in our country, we do not have a water, what do you call it? A water drainage system. Water is running on top because your water drainage system is blocked by your plastic. They are blocking this drainage system. The water is unable to move. A lot of damage happens. Just to clean the water drainage system in our country is a public employment program that the South African Communist Party should actually be campaigning around so that we can have climate resilient infrastructure where we stay. If truth be told, a lot of the infrastructure today was built under apartheid. My hometown, Pietermaritzburg, Lakhamba khona intambo zikagesi was built 50 years ago by the apartheid government. All these are areas for public employment programs. In fact, Makabane, a political report is urging the Communist Party to say just one major campaign to organize in our residential areas is building climate resilient infrastructure through public employment programs. That's where we should be organizing. If we want to resuscitate SANCO, we should resuscitate SANCO around that, rather than trying to resuscitate a SANCO that tries to mimic an ANC or a SACP branch. But take up real issues. As communists, that's what we should be doing. Our VD-based branches, that's what they should be doing. The campaign for public employment programs is one of the most important campaigns that we are taught. This relates then to the whole issue of the green transition, comrades. This is another task and challenge about greening our economy, which essentially is about protecting our environment. The most polluted province in South Africa is in Mpumalanga, Comrade Machu. Polluto Eskom, polluto Amalahle, u-Eskom. Comrade uGwede uyayazi loo nto, waqala khona ukusebenza organize anywhere. We need to change that. We need to transition to a green economy, but in a managed way, such that we don't collapse cities in Mpumalanga, we don't have massive job losses. Now, this then brings me, or this political report, to the issue of Eskom. The political report says a bit about Eskom, comrades, because it's one of our key challenges that we are facing at this point in time. No matter what people say, the Central Committee is arguing that Eskom must remain central to driving a just transition. Eskom must remain central in renewable sources of energy. This thing that we are allowing to happen now is that renewable sources must be procured via the private sector, and Eskom must simply sit with coal power stations. We are saying Eskom must play a role in the acquisition of renewables. So, no Minister of Energy, that's Naila. Umamel, kusha makomanis. And that's the line akunika wona la makomanis. Line lo yokufanele uthathe uphumela ikhanda ligcwele lithe ubamba uline kwamabovu ukuthi uEskom sifuna dlala irole kuma renewables. It just can't be left to what we call independent power producers, which are capitalist producers. And we are not saying this. Some of the people will say, yeah, here is the Communist Party is just talking ideology. Let me give you a statistic, comrades. Some of you may know this statistic. Electrification in South Africa began in 1894. Wow. That's when electrification began in South Africa, 1894. Between 1894 and 1994, that's 100 years, only 5 million households were electrified in South Africa, and mainly white households. 5 million, that's all, in 100 years. Between 1994 and 2000, 15 years, 1994, add 15 years, which was 2000 and what? 2009. Abantu abenze arithmetic esikoleni. Between 1994 and 2009, through Eskom, the ANC government connected 7 million households to electricity. 7 million, 2 million more in 15 years than 100 years between 1894 and 1994. It shows what a state-owned entity can do. The ANC has proven it as government. ugesi waze wangena ekhaya kadambuza endlini zodaka ngangazi ukuthi ugesi uyangena odakeni i-ANC yangikhombisa ukuthi ugesi uyangena odakeni. In a mud house you can put in electricity. If ESCOM could do this, why is it now that we are told that ESCOM can't enter into other sources of energy in order to provide more electricity? There are reasons why ESCOM, by the way, is where it is now. It's not because it's a public-owned entity. Some people tell us ideologically, the reason why ESCOM is in a mess is because it remains a state-owned entity. You should privatize it. Then it will be better. It's not true. The apartheid regime, ESCOM is where it is. It starts with the apartheid regime itself. That in the 1980s, when the apartheid regime was sensing that there is going to be political change in the country, it halted any further plans for expanding ESCOM capacity. De Klerk, Gama 80s, stopped it. Because they were sensing this transition. But also we had a problem. Our own government decided to adopt gear in 1996. We are not looking backward as if we are moaning or complaining, but that was a wrong policy to adopt. Completely wrong and inappropriate. And because of gear, we were wanting to privatize some state-owned enterprises. Government got a report in 1998, the year I became General Secretary of the SACP, that if you don't capacitate, what's the right word? If you don't invest, recapitalize, yes, Comrade Stan. If you don't recapitalize ESCOM, in 1998, 10, 15 years from then, South Africa is going to start experiencing blackouts. And we did not respond to that because we were wanting to privatize. Yes, ESCOM is in a mess that it is in now, not least because of state capture, but it's not state capture alone that was responsible. We did not recapitalize ESCOM in 1998 when we were told that we must recapitalize. Of course, state capture made it worse because it just opened it to stealing. Sahamba siyi-Communist Party, by the way, Makabani. Ngoba ngakhulela emaromini mina kuye kufuna uconfess sometimes. Sathi i-ANC when it was going to its Polokwane conference, we must either have a change of heart or a change of leadership at that Polokwane conference. Because there were certain things that we were unhappy about. And two main things we were unhappy about was about our economic policy and about HIV and AIDS. And indeed there was change. We take responsibility that we were also part of those who were calling for that change as the SACP. We don't regret it. Noma kwenzeka amaphutha emva kwalokho. But we must say this, by the way, because when I say this, Comrade Soli, people is like the SACP is saying it for the first time. The first Zuma administration did a lot of good things. It's not correct to say there were 9 wasted years. It's incorrect. It's completely, it's un-Marxist, it's un-dialectical, it doesn't reflect the truth. The Zuma administration rolled out antiretrovirals and increasing life expectancy in this country. The Zuma administration spent R1 trillion in a 5-year period, something that had never happened in the country, cushioning us against the global meltdown of 2007 and 2008. And as the left were demanded with COSATU that we wanted few priorities, 5 priorities, the Zuma administration embraced that. Education, health, land, I can't remember the other 2. Unemployment and rural development. 5. Let's do things that if we do them well are going to change this country. Indaba iqale wrong, my comrades. Things then started getting out of hand around 2013, 2014. Ngisawubhala incwadi ngale nto one day. Angiyibhalile ngoba bengisewu-General Secretary we-Communist Party. Mangingaseyena, I'm free now to write my own experiences in this. Because at some stage I was sent by the party to go and talk to the senior leaders that I won't mention. One of them was the Secretary General at that time, Ulaendri. He's here as himself, Kogolwa. Sithi kukhona into esingayiboni. Kune-family yakwaGupta la edla ama-resources zethu ngendlela esingayiboni. Mina ke njengomfana wakadambuza izinto siyashesha ukuyibamba ukuyithayipha. That's when things went wrong. The start of the second administration under former President Jacob Zuma, things went haywire. State capture began. And we started, by the way, raising these issues even before we spoke about them publicly. Now, of course, ESCOM is on its knees because of state capture. Transnet. We all went to Polokwane defending state-owned enterprises to be kept in the hands of the state. We're all speaking the same language. Little did we know that the content, though, of what we were saying was not the same. Tina, we wanted state-owned enterprises to remain in the hands of the state in order to drive a developmental agenda. Some of our own comrades, they wanted the SOEs to remain in the hands of the state so that they can steal from them. And that was a betrayal of a commitment we had made to Masiye Polokwane. We're not voting as the SACP, but we're supporting change. I'm saying this, comrades, so that it's important that our history is properly told. We also locked ESCOM into a 20-year cheap electricity supply to private aluminium smelter corporations, Richards Bay and Semaput. You know, those two smelters, yes, Richards Bay and Semaput, two smelters were spending electricity equal to the electricity spent by the whole of Gqeberha. What? Two smelters, they were spending equal amount of electricity as the electricity that was spent in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape. We lock our electricity into that. And this was not creating jobs. Inappropriate priorities. Of course, comrades, on top of all this, as we have said, we were then rushed, because it's important to understand Westcom. We were then rushed to Masakali crisis. In a hurry, we built Medupi and Kusile Power Station. Long after Skills had left ESCOM, by the way. Some of the engineers were gone. Because unfortunately also we had become a tendering state. Many civil servants today are not masters of the content of the departments that they lead, but they are masters in managing supply chain management processes, because we are a tendering state. In public works, we took all our engineers and we privatized and say all the things that were done by the Department of Public Works must now be tendered out, and all the engineers left. Some of those engineers came back as consultants and earned 10 times more money than they were earning when they were employed by the Department of Public Works. I'm going to come back to the issue of the state just now. Now, comrades, we are saying ESCOM must be recapitalized. We must deal with the debt of ESCOM. We've been saying this, by the way, as the SACP. And also renewables must not only just state or private sector. Communities can also form cooperatives around renewables. Universities can have their own renewable squad, generate, and the surplus they have, they sell it to you to give it to ESCOM so that we are able to provide energy. The Presidential Climate Commission, by the way, I had hoped that we were going to distribute some documents here. Is doing great work when it comes into this whole issue of renewables and the question of a just transition. You will read it for yourselves. We also want to go back to an issue that we had raised before on what is to be done. Talking economy, all along, the political report. We have always criticized black economic empowerment model as narrow. We later called it broad-based, but it's still not as broad-based as we would like it to be. We need to continue campaigning for truly broad-based. In fact, comrades, our model of BEE has also contributed to the kinds of problems we are facing in our ANC. A lot of factionalism in the ANC is linked to money and is linked to tenders and it's linked to accumulation. That is why, comrades, whilst I'm General Secretary for the next 24 to 36 hours, do not allow factionalism in the South African Communist Party. I can tell you now with my eyes closed that if you start doing that you start having a group of comrades who take it upon themselves on their own, outside of the main body of the SACP, to decide who's going to lead the SACP, you are planting factionalism. Because the factionalism starts easily. Once you organize yourself, you're going to get a counter. I can guarantee you that. Once you start organizing, you're going to get a counter-organization. Then you start eating yourself. The ANC is where it is today. It's not rocket science to see where it started. And also it's got links to patronage and money. Ningangibali mina kuma factions, my comrades, as an outgoing General Secretary of the SACP. Ningangibali. And I am not going to be party to anything that you do here that is being done on a factionalist, narrow basis, instead of dealing with these problems that are facing the workers and the poor in this country. It's my goodbye that I am not going in this day and age to come and be part of factionalist tendency in this glorious political organ of the working class. Ka Moses Kotane, ka J.P. Marx, ka Mamu Ray Alexander, ka Mamu Dorota Man. And these things, comrades, once they start, they don't stop. You know, in Western Cape, I lose us with our eyes wide open. Ama comrades aqala ukulwa. Yahamba Western Cape. Angasoyibuyisa kube kumhlakabani. Gone. Why are we losing some of the things that we are losing today? Is because of this factionalism which is linked to monies. We allow that in the Communist Party, you will liquidate the Communist Party. I can tell you, not even 10 years from now, 5 years from now, we'll be beginning to write the obituary of the SACP. Don't allow factionalism to enter a party, in whatever form. Someone was saying here, it's normally justified ideologically, but when you peel the rhetoric, you go deep. Peel the ideological rhetoric. At the heart of it, it's narrow, careerist, factionalist, moneyed interest. I can guarantee you, bet you my last half a cent. I'm not boasting, Comrade Gwet, but I can say certain things because I've got the eyes now of 24 years experience as the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. Comrades, let me move to the next major part of this report. I know it's long, but I've been told by the Central Committee I have to do it. What I have said khona i-comment engizwayo lapha che ethi nginamanga ngizwe kabi ngiyaxolisa. Comrades, we've done an analysis of the economy and what needs to be done. Go and discuss in your commissions. But also we then need to say, let's complete the picture on the state of the National Democratic Revolution at this point in time by looking at some of the key sites of power and key sites of struggle as contained in our South African road to socialism. As the SACP Central Committee, we have come to the firm conclusion, comrades, that we have not sufficiently reinforced our activities in campaigning on the ground. And that is why we are saying, let's campaign on the ground to build a powerful socialist movement of the working class and the poor. Yeah. Okay. Apologies, comrades. Mphethwe la. No General Secretary ozongena. Angifuni ukumbheka. Ahlalazi ukuthi uphethwe naye. Angifuni ukumbheka. General Secretary ozongena ahlale azi ukuthi uphethwe is part of a collective.
You can spend the last 10, 20 minutes.
All right, sure. Comrades, the South African road to socialism, which has been our program for the past 10 to 15 years, says we must build working class hegemony. We must seek to build working class hegemony in all key sites of power, and primarily in 6 key sites of power: in the state, in the economy, in the workplace, in the communities, internationally, and in the sphere of the environment. Those are the 6 key sites that our South African road to socialism says, let's build working class hegemony and influence. I want now in this section of the political report to give some kind of analysis on what is happening in some of these key sites of power and what have we done as the SACP as part of further analyzing the state of the National Democratic Revolution at this point in time. I'll pick up one and then I've been asked to take a break after that. Let's start with the workplace, comrades, as a key site of power. The workplace is the principal site of capitalist accumulation. In that is where the mass exploitation of the working class takes place. At the same time, the significance of the workplace lies in it being the primary potential site at the same time for the organization of the working class in its daily struggle. It's both a site of exploitation and a site of struggle at the same time, and a site of mobilization. So it's very important. Contrary to bourgeois theories, class struggle is not some external reality imported into the production side from the outside. Class struggle is a daily reality for workers to assert greater working class collective control over the nature and pace of work, against alienation, and over the allocation of the surplus that workers produce. For the capitalists and their senior management, cater, kuthiwa kune-cater deployment ka-ANC, ayikho cater deployment which is happening in the capitalist class. Capitalist class inama-caters, a management cater, whose primary task is to intensify exploitation. Makuthiwa uZondo akalwe ne-cater deployment siyavumelana, kodwa akaqale kongqoka kuqala phambi kokuba eze embuthweni wethu. I'm not saying that umbutho wethu did not make mistake in deploying wrong cadres, but there is nothing wrong in principle with cadre deployment. It's when we deploy wrong cadres when there are problems. There is no government in the world that doesn't do cadre deployment. Even the DA, like Western Cape, does cadre deployment every day. If you take an MP or Tarabe mayor in Cape Town, what is that? Who decides? And we mustn't be put on the defensive, by the way, on this matter. I like you, Comrade Gweta, because you are firm. Well, I'm not a fan of ZANU-PF. What are you propaganda? I'm telling you, ZANU-PF, everything that moves, they counter and explain. Now, the senior management cadre of the capitalist class is instructed to tightly control the workplace in order to achieve their objective of generating surplus. Khona no president wewafula baba Makwaibu wamukelekile la ekhaya. One of the key observations we made at our last Congress was about the neoliberal restructuring of the workplace, which has continued and deepened over the last 5 years. The first feature of this neoliberal restructuring of the workplace has been the ongoing retrenchments of hundreds of thousands of workers, and with COVID-19, comrades, the situation has worsened. The other phenomenon that is happening in South Africa's workplaces at a general level, that is continuing to have a huge impact on the nature of that workplace in South Africa, has been the continuing cheapening of labor of the working class by capital. A capital makes a profit by continuing to cheapen the value of labor. That's taking place in our country. How is that happening? Capitalist class has harnessed immigration from rural areas to urban areas as one of the weapons to deepen exploitation. By now, replacing urbanized and more expensive labor by labor that is coming from the countryside into the urban areas. But also in the South African context, the cheapening of labor in the workplace, comrades, has been taking place with capital and employers employing cheaper, often undocumented economic migrants from the rest of the Southern African region into South Africa's workplaces, creating a huge challenge that this Congress must speak about. Setting the poor against the poor, setting workers against workers. It's a fact. And by the way, I guess Umasama Komanis will speak the truth. Even domestic labor increasingly tishomkhulu. Black professionals, abanye bayakutshela ukuthi no, I prefer to employ a Zimbabwean than a South African. And all this dynamic is creating a tension between sections of the working class. If you ask any Zimbabwean in South Africa, all of them will tell you they don't like to be in South Africa. It's because there's nothing in Zimbabwe. So worldwide, the phenomenon that is happening is that you're getting this shift. For the first time now, by the way, the urban population has surpassed the rural population over the last 5 to 10 years. It's happening worldwide. The difference now, though, is that unlike before, people who are moved off the land go to urban areas and become proletarianized in factories. Today, they go to the urban areas and not get employed as such, but they get employed as usually cheap labor, or they live on the margins of the metropolitan or urban capitalist economies. That's what is happening at Johannesburg as we are speaking now. The mushrooming of these informal settlements. It's two types of migration, comrades, that are taking place. It's migration from the Bantustans, in particular the former Bantustans in South Africa, to your major metropolitan areas, and the SADC region. Remember also, the SADC region historically was the labor reservoir of South Africa's monopoly capital. Now, it's no longer a labor reservoir of only South Africa's monopoly capital. The huge services sector and hospitality sector is actually absorbing cheap labor in order to maximize the exploitation of the working class. This indeed does pose a huge, huge challenge for the progressive trade union movement on how to organize in this. These are the things we must be discussing, comrades, because we are faced now with a very awkward situation in South Africa. Our people, in some respects, are complaining that they are fighting for services with what they regard as foreign nationals. We have to listen to them, but at the same time, in listening to them, we can't be xenophobic against migrants who are running away from poverty and trying to find a better place. How do we balance both those things? And it's changing also the nature of South Africa's workplace. And if we don't manage that properly, you're going to get eruptions of workers against workers and the poor against the poor, and whilst leaving the capitalist class, setting one group of workers against the other. Now, there are new specific features, by the way, of migration now that are having an impact on the workplace in South Africa. Unlike in the past, where migrant workers from the wider SADC region mainly worked on annual contracts with trains. If you will remember Ubrahim Masegela's song, Yestimer. It's about that. It's about the movement of migrants, mainly from the region to largely Johannesburg, to the mines. Notepa, Comrade Zowan, which was a recruiting agency. Now, SADC is no longer now in Malawi, that working class, is no longer in Mozambique, is no longer in Harare, it is in the informal settlements in South Africa, fighting over the very same resources that are meant for the poor in South Africa, causing this tension and conflict. We have to understand this as South Africa. Now, given the multiple crises of social reproduction, the absorption of cheap labor, as well as absorption of part of it as unemployed or working in the informal economy on the margins of South Africa's metropolitan areas, is creating actual, as I say, and potential conflicts. The migration from the rest of the Southern African region and other regions on the African continent into South Africa has also spurred a new industry of labor brokerage, focusing on recruiting and transporting super cheap labor for both the formal economy and the domestic sector. In particular, then, the predatory behavior of South African capital and displacement of nationals in pursuit of super exploitations has again set workers against workers, poor communities against poor communities. What is to be done about this reality? It's of no use to dodge this thing as the SACP. It's of no use to dodge this challenge, comrades. We need to provide leadership, because what has happened, if we don't provide leadership, you get all sorts of populists positioning themselves to try and handle this aspect of the changing nature, not just of the workplace, by the way, but also of residential areas in South Africa. Before I stop, then, let me just say this on what is to be done. We think that, comrades, it's very important to take into account the lived experiences of the masses on the ground, to strengthen our grassroots work and deepen our appreciation of the conditions that are facing ordinary people. As Moses Kotane said in his 1934 Craddock letter, we must deal with concrete conditions here in South Africa. As the alliance, we must not engage this reality of tensions in the workplace, in the residential areas, in poor communities, by being merely reactive and lamenting the citizenship and demographic changes in certain sectors or industries. We must go further than merely stating the facts. We must go beyond just border policing proposals, because you are dealing with the manifestations of the problem. We are not dealing with the fundamental problem. We must fast-track the implementation of economic policies and sector-based guidelines which have been developed in conscientious compliance with the international, African continental, and SADC regional protocols to which South Africa is a signatory. And this includes things like waste pickers integration guidelines for South Africa, building the recycling economy, public space trading guidelines for local government. But the recently adopted Jacob Gauteng Township Economic Development Policy and Legislation is indeed designed to bring opportunity to many and confront the inequality at spatial levels by changing how townships are regulated and governed, to transform them into zones of widespread job-creating commercial activity. Regulation, yes, is important. The challenge of what we refer to as undocumented migrants, let's not be politically correct about this. Let's face it as a reality, comrades. We are not going to stop migration. Let's be clear. It's a worldwide phenomenon. It's part of the uneven development of capitalism. We must understand that. What organizational challenges does this pose? But also, let's not run away from some of the new dangers that this poses. Intelligence information tells us, for instance, that undocumented migrants in particular are a source of gangster bosses for criminal activities, who are both South African and also who are not necessarily South African, because undocumented migrants can't be traced when it comes to performing certain gangster operations, whether it's got to do with drugs and so on. But we can't turn the anger against undocumented migrants as such. Rather, we should be looking at how best legally to deal with the reality of those challenges. Listen to what our people are saying. Do not ignore them. But at the same time, let us deal with the reality of how we manage this situation in a manner that we are able in the end to deal with it. Let's neither be xenophobic or close to our ears to what the people are saying on the ground. What's the answer to this? That's what this Congress should be debating. Because this thing is going to get out of hand. There are organizations I won't mention who are being seen as the biggest champion of this cause. There's also Operation Dudula, which is thinking that you're going to solve this problem by attacking that section of the working class which is not South African in terms of the nationality, that's also not a solution to the problem. What is the South African Communist Party saying about this matter? Gauteng is leading in terms of a township economy, the development of a township economy. What lessons should we actually be learning from Gauteng in terms of dealing with this? But also as communist comrades, we must be encouraging dialogues with all workers in all workplaces by the trade union movement and engagement on that score. We must neither be xenophobic nor close our eyes to the real challenges that are posed, not only, by the way, by migration from SADC, but also even migration from the rural countryside in South Africa. Now that I'm talking about countryside, I'm thinking of cabbage, potatoes, agricultural activities, and I've gotten hungry. And the chair said, the moment you feel hungry, please stop right at that point. So I'm taking a break for now, Makabane. Forward to socialism, forward. Mandla! Angiqedile kodwa.
Comrades, thank you to the General Secretary, but he's still coming back. We will now take lunch, and we must be back now. It's 1:30. We must be back at 2:30. And I'm requesting the leadership in the form of secretaries and chairpersons to ensure that their delegates come back here on time. We've lost a lot of time, comrades. Thank you. We adjourn. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Comrades, lunch is served at Serengeti and Terminal B. At Serengeti and Terminal B.